Let's bring in Charles Blaha. He was the director of the Office of Security and Human Rights in the U.S. State Department. He joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Very good to have you here on the program, sir. I know you're no longer in that position, but just give us your assessment in terms of the heightened security and heightened risks for U.S. troops and embassy personnel in the region now following these U.S. strikes on Iran tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. I think the thing to recognize now is even though the United States has been indirectly involved with Israeli operations against Iran, we've provided intelligence, we've provided refueling, we've provided the bombs. Right now, as of tonight, the United States of America is directly involved in a war with Iran. And we don't know, nobody knows, what the Iranian response will be. And President Trump, we've just heard, has promised that there will be future military action depending on Iran's response. So this, depending on the Iranian response, is not a one-off. That's very worrisome. The second thing to think about is that the president had claimed in his statement that Iran's enrichment capacity has been completely obliterated. That remains to be seen. That will take probably a very long time to figure out. The battle damage assessment of this will be very long. And even if Iran's enrichment capability has been significantly reduced, Iran has always said that it retains the right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to engage in enrichment. And so it's far from clear that Iran will abandon that goal. From an Iranian point of view, as one of your prior speakers pointed out, there was about to be another round of negotiations, and the U.S. green-lighted an Israeli attack. President Trump then announced that there would be 2 weeks to try to resume negotiations, and then pretty much immediately attacked Iran. So the Iranian leadership has to wonder, why should we go back to the table? And the U.S. has just played its biggest card. They have just dropped the biggest bombs in their arsenal. What is left, and what incentive is there if you're in Iran's position to go back to the negotiating table? And from a diplomatic point of view, that's really worrisome.
So again, I just want to return to my initial question. What kind of risk does this pose to State Department personnel, military personnel stationed in the region right now? Do you think that they are at greater risk at this point?
Definitely, they are. Iran has the capacity, either through short-range missiles or through proxy attacks, to attack our diplomatic facilities and to attack our troops in the region. So definitely, the risk is elevated. And what we know is that the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is beginning to provide for the ability of American citizens and American diplomatic personnel to leave the region.
Now, if you were still at the State Department, what would your advice be at this moment to Americans stationed in the region, or even just American citizens currently in Israel or in these countries around Iran?
My advice would be to leave. Now, the embassy our embassy in Jerusalem is a different question. My guess would be that there are probably greater protections in place and it's at more of a distance from Iran, and better protected than some of the other places. But I would advise American citizens to leave the region.
We've just seen a post here from Donald Trump on his Truth Social social network. He says, any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Thank you, Donald J. Trump. Now, sir, you just stated here that they've already used the biggest bomb they've got in their arsenal. Well, in fact, there are bigger bombs, the nuclear ones. Is that the next step from the U.S. of actually engaging with nuclear weapons in Iran if Trump says that they will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight?
No, I would guess that the United States would not engage in any type of nuclear response to an Iranian response. That would be crossing a threshold. Remember that the president often exaggerates and often threatens things, and so I think that type of threat needs to be taken with a grain of salt. When the president says we, let's remember that the president a few days ago said that we rule the skies over Iran. Well, we, the United States, don't. The Israelis do. So it would be difficult. It would be difficult to understand how the United States could do anything more than it's already done. And I would completely rule out any nuclear option. I think at best the United States would give the green light to Israel to engage in more attacks. The United States might authorize more attacks with conventional weapons, but that's risky because the United States planes could get shot down. United States pilots could get captured, and that would be something that the president wouldn't want to see. Let's remember right now that there is really mixed reaction in the United States, even to this first attack. And there are a lot of people in the president's own party who worried that even one attack would get the United States more involved than we want it to be. And for there to be future attacks would certainly increase opposition, not just from the Democrats, but also from people in the president's own party. And the president is very attuned to domestic consequences.
Now, from your years at the State Department, can you recall any conversations that you were part of when discussing a possible strike on Iran? I mean, the Iran issue is not new. You know, numerous presidents have had to deal with Iran and the possible desire to develop a nuclear weapon. When you were at the State Department, what was the discussion like? Was it, were you sort of advising, absolutely do not go there? Or, what are some of the dynamics in those discussions that you heard at the State Department?
Well, there are two things that the State Department worries about with Iran. One is developing a nuclear weapon. Obviously, that would be very, very destabilizing and threatening. And the State Department always has been and should be focused on trying to prevent that from happening and focusing through negotiations. The other problem was, of course, that Iran's ancillary activities, its sponsorship of groups the United States considers terrorists. Now, what happened with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the so-called Iran deal, is that President Obama made a decision that trying to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon was so important that the United States would not try to pursue ancillary things, all of Iran's troublemaking in the region. And so the JCPOA went ahead. In my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of my colleagues in the State Department, a lot of my former colleagues, it was a good agreement. President Trump chose to break that agreement, and Iran responded by enriching more uranium, which was a very, very negative development for both sides. The best resolution would be for both parties to come back to the negotiating table. But as I said, I think tonight's actions, unfortunately, make that less likely, at least in the short term.
Yeah. Now, let me just ask you a final question, a really quick one, but I have to ask it, you know, since you used to work at the State Department. Was tonight a declaration of war from Donald Trump? He didn't say it, but is that your interpretation, that the U.S. is now at a state of war with Iran?
Well, de facto, yes. But this is an area that's very controversial in United States politics, because under our Constitution, only the Congress may declare war. The United States hasn't had a declared war all the time, in a long time, but we have, over the decades, engaged in many military operations. The Congress passed a law called the War Powers Act that said that the president should notify Congress and get approval of any actions like that. All presidents, both Democrats and Republicans, have said that they don't need to abide by that, that's an infringement on executive power. But that's a legal constitutional argument. And as I said at the top, in fact, the United States is now directly involved in a war with Iran.
All right, Charles, thank you so much for that analysis and assessment.
Thanks.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Thanks.